Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Welcome back to Horror Analysis with me, Drew. Welcome back. Today, we're going to finish our backward progression of history of horror. I'm not quite done with the section History of Horror, this section here, Horror's History, Section C, but I'm done with the bulk of it. I'm done with the new stuff. I'm going to do 2 videos of review. I don't think it'll take more than 2 videos. It should only take 2. I don't think I can cram it all into one huge, monstrous video, so I'm going to break it up into 2, which I'll explain more later. And that's going to be going over history forwards, since we did history backwards. I'm going to do a quick review while doing history forwards. Today, we're in Chapter 2. Chapter 1 is the introduction, so Chapter 2 in Shill, in Supernatural Horror and Literature by Lovecraft, which is the dawn of the horror tale. Right? Yeah, I know it is. Introduction, page 17, Dawn of the Horror Tale. And of course, he's going to say that the dawn of the horror tale was anything up to like pretty much anything up to 1800. There was a little bit that I went over last time, as I said. Last time we had the big chunk at the 1790, 1780 mark, and then the little bit that was before that, which wasn't much. 1750s. Anything before the 1750s was very small. Right, so before the 1700s, 1600s, 1500s, 1400s, 1300s, 12s, 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s, 6s, 5s, 4s, 3s, 2s, 1s, and 0s, and then BC or BCE, depending on your preference. All of that I'm going to mash into one video today, and it's not going to be a very long video, I don't think. Not a lot of art horror going on during that time. Possibly because there's a lot of actual horror going on during that time. I was reading over my notes today, reading over this, getting ready for the video. I thought to myself, I pretty much know why there wasn't any, horror horror writers. And if someone came up and said, I have this story, it's a great, scary story about, witches or monsters or whatever, and if it was convincing enough, they wouldn't say, hey, you're a great writer. They'd say, hey, you're in league with the devil, let's burn you at the stake. So I think there was quite a bit of that going on during this time. Oh shoot, I forgot that. Oh well. I have my hot water, but it's very hot. It's actually too hot to drink. So the writing that was going on in the very early part will have, the folklore, the tales of heroes and mythology and stuff going on. And then later on, at the 1600s, 17th century, we'll have the beginnings of modern writing in general. We'll have Shakespeare, we'll have Christopher Marlowe, and we'll have a few other things, even back to maybe Thomas Mallory. We could have the before year 1000 and after year 1000, but we can certainly, that's sort of still confusing. So let's actually have the list up. This is stuff that Lovecraft is mentioning in his book Usually on page 17 or page 20. Um, the Book of Enoch is going to be pretty much the earliest one, which is the book of the Bible, or the Apocrypha, um, in which the angels are mating with humans and birthing monsters, which leads into the flood, an alternate of the flood story, that God flooded the earth with Noah being saved to drown out all these monsters that are wandering around. And of course, this Book of Enoch has been found quite a lot of places. Yeah, this one was actually pretty much verified as being 300 BC area. The next one down, the Claviculi of Solomon, which is, if you're looking this one up, you can find all these online too. You don't want to look up claviculae. You want to look up key. Key would be the key of Solomon's key, is what that is. I think Lovecraft during the time thought it was quite a bit older, around Solomon era, 300 BC, along those lines. But of course, it was proven to be forgery, or I guess 15th century, so not BCE at all. It's certainly Common Era stuff. Let's see here. So we have yeah, that would be the Christian tradition, or the Judeo-Christian tradition. Obviously Judeo-Christian if we're talking about BCE. But the Key of Solomon would be Common Era. Of dark writing, I suppose, would be it. There's also the Roman era. Pliny the Younger and Petronius, which would be both Romans. The Satyricon by Petronius, he has it on page 20. He talks about the werewolf story that's in Petronius. Oh, I forgot about this one. Hold on. There's a werewolf story in Petronius, and I did listen to this. You are able to find this on LibriVox if you wanted to go listen to the audiobook version. Like I did. I didn't listen to the whole Satyricon. I just listened to the one story, and I think I've heard it before. It's weird. A guy, walking along the road at night, with somebody else. Somebody else, rushes, takes off his clothes, and runs away, and goes and slaughters some pigs because he turns into a werewolf, and his clothes turn to stone for some reason. I think that's right. It's been a month or so since I listened to it. Yeah, I think his clothes turned to stone. I was like, "What's that? That's new." Oh, there's one that apparently I missed this, and one I'm not familiar with at all. Gruesome passages in Apuleius. Let me okay, control N. Apuleius. Oh, it's in Metamorphoses. Berber. Oh, the Golden Ass, which is kind of famous. The Golden Ass is a Roman era work of mythology and stuff. Kind of like the Metamorphoses, it's just that sort of genre. There's some gruesome passages, apparently, that I didn't notice. So that should be on the list as well. Okay, there's a brief... this is the Pliny one. Petronius died in 66 Common Era. Pliny the Younger, rather. And Philemon and Machates, if that's the proper pronunciation. Lord, I don't know. But that is the... They're both referring to the same thing, and it was kind of confusing. I'll read out this paragraph, because this paragraph is kind of confusing. Alright. The brief but celebrated letter of Pliny the Younger to Sura, and the odd compilation on the wonderful events by the Emperor Hadrian's Greek freedman Phlegon. It is in Phlegon that we first find that hideous tale of the corpse bride Philinion. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Philinion in Machates. Alright, so I'm on a roll today. It's Philinnnion, not Philemon. No wonder I couldn't find it. It's Philemon online, which I wasn't really able to find any information on this one either. Let me try Philinnnion. And Philippines. That's not what I was after. Yeah, I've been having a hard time finding this stuff, by the way. So, some of this stuff, Lovecraft had it available to him. And something happened between the 30s and now. That's probably still available someplace. It's just not readily accessible on Google searches, or LibriVox, or probably I could find it if I wanted to go through all of Pliny the Younger's letters. I don't think I have that kind of patience to find a brief letter. Anyway, so Philemon and Machates, according to the interwebs, the guy marries a Empusa, according to this site, who sucks his blood at night. Goethe borrowed that to become the Bride of Corinth, and according to the German student is also, according to Lovecraft, also from this Philinion and Machates. So that would be the Roman era stuff, or the Roman style. The Satyricon, Philemon and Machates, and Pliny the Younger's letter. We have Beowulf from the 8th to the 11th century. Since no one's really sure when it was written. And then that would, of course, would be Nordic or Germanic. Norse, I guess. I don't know. Scandinavian era. And then we go into the Middle Ages. The La Mort d'Arthur, Thomas Mallory's 1485. What did he had? He had The Ghost of Sir Gawain, The Sword and Silk from the Corpse in Chapel Perilous by Sir Lancelot, and The Tomb Fiend is seen by Sir Galahad. So it's got some creepy stuff in there. I don't know if it's just because he was writing legendy stuff that he didn't get burned at the stake, or probably because it was published after his death. He could get away with stuff like that. The next one would be the first Faust story, 1587, called Faustbuch, German, published, written by Anonymous. So, about this time, we're dealing with, not a lot of authors calling attention to themselves, if they're writing creepy stuff, because, especially, this is the story of Faust is selling your soul to the devil. Not something you really want to advertise details of in a time where you could be burnt to stake for consorting with the devil. Makes sense. So, Dr. Faustus, the first Faust story. There was a Dr. Faust, who was an alchemist in the 14th century? 1300s? Right. So, and then in the 1587, the earliest Faust story as a guy who sold his soul to the devil for knowledge and power comes along. Dr. Faustus, the first play version of that story by Kit Marlowe in 1604, who of course was a contemporary of Shakespeare, and that did very well, and that was, probably the first one that you had the name to it, or it had a living author. Shakespeare, of course, and it was already an established story by that point, so he wasn't in danger of being accused of anything. It's like if someone told the story of Homer, or Homer stories, or even the the Greek stories. You could retell those, or Beowulf even. You could retell those because they're established. Should I go over any of the plots of these? Book of Enoch I did mention. I don't know much about the Solomon's Key. Satyricon, the werewolf, I did mention. Philemon and Machetes is the guy who's married the corpse. It's the corpse bride idea. Beowulf, I'm assuming that most of you know the plot of Beowulf. Grendel is the monster, and then Grendel's mother is also the monster. And Beowulf fights them, depending on whose version you're on. I recently watched the Neil Gaiman movie version of Beowulf, and I kind of enjoyed it. I think I prefer the what's her name? Sarah Polley version, Beowulf and Grendel. And I prefer Neil Gaiman's updated book version in Fragile Things, which was cool. And it was kind of a sequel to American Gods. Anyway, we're getting off the topic. But Beowulf, the original. Oh, and I also liked the 13th Warrior, also based on Beowulf. Another good one. More actiony. But a monster's terrorizing a kingdom. Guy sends for Beowulf. Beowulf fights the monster, etc. Thomas Mallory, I did go over the Ghost of Sir Gawain, the Silk from the Corpse, the Theft of the Sword and Silk from the Corpse in Chapel of Perilous by Lancelot, and the Tomb Fiend seen by Galahad. I did mention those. Faust, I mentioned, and now we go into Shakespeare. Not a lot horrific in Shakespeare. Hamlet's ghost never really scared me. Oh, I forgot his name. I watched about 5 versions of Macbeth today. The witches in Macbeth didn't scare me. They could get creepy. The sleepwalking scene is pretty creepy. The ghost of... Did I write it down? Of course not. Oh, goodness. Ghost of... Oh, Fleance's son. Oh my god, I'm gonna go crazy here. I gotta look it up. Sorry, folks. Banco's ghost. I didn't even get a chance to look it up. I remembered it first. Most versions I was able to find online didn't scare me at all. They're really bad versions of Banco's ghost. The one I grew up with, the one I watched a couple of times as a kid, it actually has Kelsey Grammer in it. Frasier, for those who don't know. Kelsey Grammer played Lennox. He wasn't the main character. He wasn't Macbeth or any of the big ones, but Lennox is a pretty big character. And Banco's ghost in that creeped me out. Of course, I watched it when I was far too young to understand most about Macbeth, because it's a pretty dense story. I think the witches were pretty creepy in that too. Maybe not. But Banco's ghost just creeped me out. Oh, it was creepy. There's some other Banco's ghost. I went through about 6 of them, trying to find something creepy. There's some that were alright. Most weren't. Patrick Stewart's was kind of disappointing. Ian McKellen's, there wasn't anything there. He assumed that there was something there. It was just an empty chair that he was talking to as a ghost. He saw it, but the audience didn't. The Kelsey Grammer version, there was a whole procession of ghosts with Banco with his crown on because he's giving birth to kings. White, very I think they just painted him white, which is kind of creepy. Even, Asian influenced for the painting white thing. Yeah, so Banco can scare me. That was 1606. And that's, that's pretty much it for 100 years. Of course, we're going into the Enlightenment era. Science is taking over. And as science takes over, there's not a lot of supernatural is scoffed at. And then, of course, the Romantic scoffs at science. The Romantic era follows Enlightenment, scoffing at science. So, of course, that's going to be leading up to the real horror. Like Frankenstein, which is the point of, look what science does. It creates monsters. Or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Pretty close. Of course, there's more hypocriticalness there. Right. Yeah, so that's the European versions, the Mallory to German. The Mallory was French, English. Faustbach, German, and there was a German, based on a German scientist or alchemist. Christopher Kit Marlowe took that story and turned it into a drama, tragedy, in 1604 in England, and then Shakespeare took other stories. If they weren't his own, Hamlet was sort of his own. Macbeth was a story that was around-ish. But not that dramatic. And made it pretty creepy. It's a pretty creepy story. The Scottish play. You're not even supposed to say it, but I'm not an actor, so I don't care. Yeah, so Banco's Ghost. Still creeped me out. And the Kelsey Grammer version, which was 1982, I believe. I was able to IMDb it. It had, of course, it had good performances by everybody, I'm sure, but the only real name that people know during that time is Kelsey Grammer. And it's like 5 years before Cheers came out, which would be where Dr. Fraser Crane started, where he became, Kelsey Grammer became a name, or a well-known face anyway. So, yeah, it's a very slim pickings before 1700 because you ran a risk. I think there's a risk involved in telling these stories. Roman era, you're fine. In the ancient, in antiquity, back in BCE, you're fine because you didn't have witch burnings and stuff like that. But there's a dark age here from from the 100 Common Era to the 8th century, which is 700s, or the 11th century, depending on when you want to say Beowulf came out. And then that's not really Christendom, being that it's still have Odin and stuff mentioned. It's not really Christendom's story. It's what's it called? I can't remember. Pagan, I guess, would be the proper term. It's a pagan story, at least in part. The Neil Gaiman movie version, of course, had a lot of Christishness in it. And then after that, you don't have anything until Mallory. So, yeah. That is shill, folks. What I'm going to do next time, and that's the history of horror. That is that done. What I'm going to do next time, before we go on to horror anthropology, I'm going to go forward, starting from 300 BC, and going through the narrative horror forward, trying to get up to 2013 again. And having, trying to point out where stuff is influencing that to this. And of course, this isn't all that was written, all that was done in horror during the time. Of course, the campfire or fire tales of, the caveman, I don't like that word, but Stone Age or Bronze Age or whatever, that of course wasn't written down, most likely had monsters. They were still the tales of, the Beowulf tales, or tales of heroes, or tales of monsters. It's just that they weren't written down, or they didn't survive if they were written down. So, the earliest we have would be the Book of Enoch, which is available online. I couldn't find it on audiobook version, but it was a quick read. The passages that mean anything were even quicker read. So yeah. So I'm going to continue with History of Horror for one or two more times. I might do a history of horror narrative next time, just going forward from the beginning to the present. Just doing a quick recap and salient points. And then I think the time after that, I'm going to try to do some specific ones, like History of the Overreacher, which would be beginning with Faust book, the earliest Faust story, and then going into, the Overreacher that we know and love that we talked about before. History of the Vampire. I did mention a few times, I forget what the name of it was. Well, there's Polidori's first vampire novel. And there was the first one where it used the host or the crosses or holy water to to back off vampires. And there was the first. Then it came up to Sheridan LaFanu was the first sexualized vampire. Then into Dracula and into modern stuff. So good stuff all around. Yeah, I'll go into more detail on that one for one of the videos. Or if it's really short tomorrow, I might just do, for the next video, it's probably not going to be tomorrow, I'll probably just do all the forward histories in one. We'll see. This was a very short video, 30 minutes, bit over 30 minutes, for 18th centuries, 19th centuries, but there wasn't much going on. There are still campfire tales, and of course that influenced a lot of people, but since they're not written down, we can't tell when they were done. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll continue with History of Horror, getting close to the end, I'm ready to jump into horror anthropology. I really am. So History of Horror next time. My name's Drew. Thanks for watching. Horror analysis. And I'll see you next time.